Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. I bet you thought I was going to come in from that side. Tricked you, came in from that side, and guess what? Today, we are on the other side of Swaggle's room, which you know what that means. We got ourselves a whiteboard video here today. Yes, a very, very, very special whiteboard video for you guys, because we have to talk about a very, very important thing out there in the comic book collecting hobby, and that is this idea of the DARKHAWK prospect theory. The DARKHAWK prospect theory, that is right, DARKHAWK, as you can see right there, sitting on the sides. We got to talk about this idea of the DARKHAWK prospect theory. Now, of course, the first question we got to ask ourselves is, what is the DARKHAWK prospect theory? Well, let me tell you, dear watcher on YouTube right now, the DARKHAWK prospect theory is something that I'm coining in terms of framing it to comic books, because obviously here on the YouTube channel we talk about comic books, but really what we're talking about with the DARKHAWK prospect theory is, for you people who know your economics and things like that, we're really just talking about prospect theory right here, or otherwise known as, we'll call it Grail for the comic book people out there, loss aversion theory. Grail loss aversion theory. Prospect theory or loss aversion theory. What are these two ideas? Well, in simple terms, these are the ideas of when people want to invest in certain things or buy certain things, they put different emotional values on gaining money versus losing money. And in most instances, you can make the assumption and understand that losing money feels a lot worse than gaining money, and that is sort of the psychological effect that we all have. So in this video here today, we have to talk about this idea of the DARKHAWK prospect theory and how we actually have to trick ourselves. We have to rewire our mindset in able to understand that we should not have this loss aversion feeling when it comes to buying Grail comic books. We have to rewire our brain so that we can make better decisions with how we make our purchases in the comic book collecting hobby. But before I go on, I must say this might be a little bit of a longer video, might be a little bit more of a rambly video. Obviously with our whiteboard stuff, we get a little wild and crazy and long-winded over here. So, you may want to grab some bags and boards, or you may want to put me on 2x speed if you guys want to understand what the DARKHAWK prospect theory is here. Yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this sort of thing. So, like, comment, subscribe, all those good things. All right, let's talk about DARKHAWK prospect theory. Now, why did I put DARKHAWK in front of prospect theory right here? Well, I think what we have to do is figure out how the DARKHAWK book relates to this idea of the Grail. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are looking at the current state of the market, and they're thinking that to themselves, Swaggle, I don't really feel too comfortable making my big purchase on DARKHAWK #1 right here. I'm a little bit worried that if I buy DARKHAWK #1 right now, it's going to continue to go down in value. I am very, very fearful. I have loss aversion theory. I am fearful that the book is going to continue to go down, and it's going to hurt so much more than the idea of the book going up. So in this video, we're going to talk about that. We're going to weigh some of the pros and cons and risks and things like that to understand if we should really be thinking about DARKHAWK #1 in that way. Now, I know you guys are thinking to yourselves, well, again, why did I use DARKHAWK? Well, we're talking about this in terms of grails. And I think for most of you guys out there, you will understand that, DARKHAWK is the biggest grail there is in all of comic books. So I think we can all sort of, relate to this idea if we're thinking about it in terms of DARKHAWK. So let's think about this for a second and understand this sort of chart we have here with the prospect theory of DARKHAWK. So first things first, we got to talk about our favorite person out there who is a comic book collector. Of course, you guys know him to be Key Collector Kevin, right? We've talked about Key Collector Kevin before. Key Collector Kevin, what does Key Collector Kevin want to do? Well, you guys know he wants to go to the moon. Key Collector Kevin always wants to go to the moon because that is the place where he can make lots of money selling his comic books. And Key Collector Kevin's very, very, very favorite comic book of all time is actually going to be DARKHAWK #1. So Key Collector Kevin is thinking to himself, I want to buy DARKHAWK #1. How much is it going to cost me? Well, obviously, he knows the fair market value for DARKHAWK #1 to be $1 million. That is a real number for DARKHAWK #1. But Because that number has a lot of zeros on it, we're going to make it real simple for Kevin and, the sake of this video here today. We're going to say that the DARKHAWK book costs $100, which would be a total absolute steal, would be absolutely ridiculous. If you could find DARKHAWK #1 for $100, you would be a fool not to buy it right here. Now, this is probably a good time to say that, even though we're talking about financial things with comic books here, this is not financial advice. Remember, I am a guy who is in my comic book room right now talking to actually nobody as the camera is rolling, and I also am trying to be sort of serious about the fact that I actually feel that the value of DARKHAWK #1 is worth $1 million. So again, don't listen to me. Remember, there's a lot of these books. All right, let's go on here. So Key Collector Kevin wants to go to the moon. He wants to buy DARKHAWK #1, and he wants to get it for $100. Well, let's first identify some of the feelings that Key Collector Kevin has when he's thinking about making this purchase, or when he has this book in his collection. Well, there's this chart right here, okay? Again, we're talking about prospect theory, right? We have to understand prospect theory, loss aversion theory. Here is the chart that a lot of other smart people out there in the philosophical economic fields have already created this chart right here. And here's the things that they found when it comes to having certain investments in terms of how they go up in value and how they go down in value. Well, what they actually found is there's a lot more diminishing returns on gains than there is on losses. So the chart actually looks a little something like this. When you have gains, it kind of goes up and then it really sort of rounds off right there. Whereas if you have losses, what it actually looks like is it kind of does the reverse, where it feels really bad and then eventually it starts to level off right there. So let's take a look at that in terms of what that means for someone like Kevin here, who has his DARKHAWK #1. How is he going to feel? He makes this purchase of DARKHAWK #1 for $100 right here. And then we go 6 months from now and the book has actually gone up by $50 for Kevin. Wow, the book has gone up for $50. And so Kevin actually now has a DARKHAWK book that is $150 in terms of its value. So we can see here, this is the satisfaction chart, meaning he feels good about his purchase. And this is the feels bad chart, right? Means he feels bad about his purchase. Well, the book has gone up in value. So of course, Key Collector Kevin is very, very happy about that, versus if the book went down in value, which we're going to talk about in a second. Wait, that wouldn't be happy. That would be sad, right? He's going to feel bad right there. So we're talking about gains, we're talking about losses. So the book goes up in value for $50. And so Kevin has this satisfaction window that is actually this big, right? We can kind of measure this satisfaction window if we're doing the chart here, where we went up $50. We're kind of evaluating it based off the curve of these other smart people who've already defined what the curve looks like. And we have this satisfaction window that is this big. Now, let's talk about how Kevin is going to feel if the book goes down $50 in value. What happens if 6 months after Kevin's $100 purchase that he got in an absolute steal for $990,990,900 less than what it should actually be, if it goes down $50 in value here? Well, let's chart this out. So the book went down $50 in value. We got to go down here and we touch the line graph and then we come in like this. So all of a sudden, Kevin's loss has a value range that looks a little something like this. The value feels badness range is that big, right? Based on how the psychological curve works. So again, if we're evaluating what it looks like when things feel good at this going up by $50, it's this big. But if things go down by $50, it's this big. So we're talking about, in terms of the line measurement here of what this kind of looks like. If things go down in value, it looks this big, versus if things go up in value, it looks this big. So we're kind of operating at a 2-to-1 feels bad to satisfaction metric here. So this is one of the things that creates this idea of the loss aversion theory, or the prospect theory. The prospect of losing $50 is so scary to Key Collector Kevin over here that it absolutely destroys any sort of hopeful gains of Kevin going to the moon. He's so worried about losing $50 that he is unwilling to go to the moon with his $50 gain. So that kind of creates this sort of cascading snowball effect, this analysis paralysis, this idea that if he does lose money and he does lose out and he buys into this bear market, he's going to go down in value, and that's going to feel real bad. But that is just prospect theory. That is just one sort of way of identifying how Kevin is going to feel emotionally about his potential investment in the DARKHAWK book that he got for $100 right here. But one other thing we have to talk about before we sort of bring it all full circle to the point of this video is we have to talk about this other theory. There is actually a second theory we have to talk about that is not prospect theory. Some of you guys may know this to be utility theory. Utility theory. Now, what is this? Utility theory is the way to measure, the other benefits of how we value our particular Grail that we got for $100 right here. So really quickly, let's talk about utility theory for a second, and then we'll bring it back to loss aversion theory, and then we'll bring it back to sort of Kevin here and his idea of buying into, say, this bear market right here. So we have utility theory, and it looks a little something like this. If Kevin buys 0 DARKHAWKs, right? Kevin wants DARKHAWK number 1, but he's unwilling to do it. He buys 0 of them, right? He buys 0 DARKHAWKs. Well, what are the utility points that Kevin is going to get for buying 0 DARKHAWKs? Well, have you done the math? Obviously, if he buys 0 DARKHAWKs, he's going to have 0 utility points, right? 0 utility points. Kevin, we got to get rid of your moon because it's currently in the way of our chart right here. All right, what happens if Kevin buys 1 DARKHAWK book, right? He gets 1 DARKHAWK book. How is Kevin going to feel when he buys that DARKHAWK book? Well, I would assume that Kevin is going to feel really good about himself, right? So we give him utility points here, and we're going to give him 100 utility points. 100 utility points. He buys the comic book. He now has it. He gets to put it on his wall, and he gets to feel super, super good about owning the first appearance of the greatest character ever created in all of superhero comic books. So he gets 100 utility points. Now, Swaggle House, where did you get 100 utility points? What does that actually mean? Did you just make up that number? Yes, I just made up that number, okay? We're not worried about how I derive the utility points. We're just making up a random number so that you guys can understand the principles behind this theory. All right, now, usually what happens is, we kind of go down this line here and we say, what happens if Kevin gets 2 DARKHAWKs? What happens if he gets 3 DARKHAWKs? What happens if he gets 4 DARKHAWKs? But we're not going to really do that. I'm going to change the idea of utility theory a little bit right here. So we're going to actually say that what happens if Kevin gets a DARKHAWK book that he gets at a discount, even more so than that of his $100? What happens if Kevin is able to sort of get not only his favorite Grail, we're going to call this 1A, by the way, guys, not only his favorite Grail book, but he's actually able to get it on Black Friday. It was a 20% off sale. So he actually bought his $100 DARKHAWK book for $80. He got such a steal. So now, what does his utility points feel like? He actually gets not only the book of 100, but he gets a bonus 50 points because he got a deal on it, right? He feels so good. He got the DARKHAWK book at 20% off, and he feels 150 utility points. Oh, okay. Now, what happens if not only is it Black Friday, where Kevin here gets DARKHAWK number 1 for $20 off? What happens if he happens to be at a Comic-Con and there's a super smoking hot, Psylocke cosplayer that not only does he get to buy the book from, but he gets to take a picture with this super hot Psylocke cosplayer? Well, of course, Kevin would feel even better about that experience. Not only is he getting the book that he wants, not only is he getting it for 20% off, but he gets to have a great picture with this super hot Psylocke cosplayer, and it goes from 150 utility points to 180 utility points. It's even that much better for Kevin right there. Now, let me just clarify a little thing. Of course, it is 2022. Maybe Kevin wants to take a picture with a super hot Jason Momoa cosplayer, okay? Either way, just go with me on this one. Just whatever, insert your hot cosplayer that you want to take a picture with, and that your utility points goes up to 180. So Kevin here has to evaluate, look, if I was able to buy this book, that would grant me a certain type of utility point. If I was able to get it at a discount, that would grant me even more utility points. And if I was even to get this book at a discount, and also I was able to get it with a super hot cosplayer taking my photo, that would give me even more utility points, okay? And then what happens if, Kevin not only gets 1 hot cosplayer to take a photo with them, he gets 2 hot cosplayers to take a photo with him? Well, I don't know how many utility points that's going to yield, but, it kind of feels like once you get 1 photo with a cosplayer, what is 2 photos with a cosplayer really going to do for you? I mean, you're going to post it on Instagram and you get to have, swipe to the next photo. I mean, is anyone really going to swipe? Everyone just looks at the one, right, and hits like, and then we move on. So again, the utility points have sort of a diminishing return here. So when you step back here and you think to yourself, well, Kevin, obviously, when the scenarios are like this, and you want to buy your DARKHAWK number 1, you shouldn't just buy it for 100 utility points, because you should be waiting for Black Friday to buy it at 20% off for 150 utility points. And actually, I would even say not only should you wait for that Black Friday, you should wait for the Black Friday that is actually happening at the comic book con, where there is a super hot cosplayer that you can take a photo with. And actually, no, what I would actually say is don't wait for the Black Friday selling your DARKHAWK book at the Comic-Con where there's a hot cosplayer taking your photo. You should actually wait for the Comic-Con that is selling DARKHAWK on a Black Friday where there's 2 cosplayers taking your photo. That's the one you should wait for, right? Wrong. Because we have to talk about this other little inconvenient thing. Kevin is not going to the moon today. We have to talk about this other idea here with the utility theory, which is the idea of marginal utility. Marginal utility. This is the other thing we have to add before we can really make a determination of the utility points that Kevin is walking away with. Now, what is marginal utility? Well, as you can already see from the chart right here, marginal utility is going to be, the utility points that you get that is compounding on top of what you're already given. So let's take a look at the utility points here. Between 0 DARKHAWK books and 1 DARKHAWK book that Kevin was able to get for himself, what is the marginal utility that is going from 0 to 100? Well, the marginal utility right there is actually 100 points, right? Kevin wants DARKHAWK number 1. It's his ultimate grail, and he's able to actually buy the book, and when he gets it, he feels really, really good. He feels like 100%. He feels like $100. Marginal utility is 100. Now, what is the marginal utility for Kevin when he gets the book at 100 and he gets it at a 20% discount? What does this marginal utility become? Well, this marginal utility is actually only 50, even though the absolute value of utility is 150, which is more than 100. In terms of his feeling of goodness, his euphoria that he gets out of this equation where he gets the book at a 20% discount, the jump from this to this is only 50 points. It's not the initial jump of 100. So there is this diminishing return. Now, what happens when the cosplayer comes in? Well, Kevin only gets a 30 right here. Oh, not 330 for the marginal utility. And then when the second player comes in, Kevin only gets a 5-point marginal utility. So, Swaggle what are you talking about here? You've been talking about this utility. You started off with, this whole satisfaction feels bad, man. Kevin, key collector thing. What is going on with this chart right here? Well, the one thing that we have to talk about when we're thinking about prospect theory and loss aversion, and we're trying to purchase DARKHAWK number 1 for $1 million, we have to evaluate these things in terms of utility and value and what makes a good decision and how we, use these metrics and these measurements in order to make the best investment that we can make for ourselves. And what we have to realize is that the initial purchase right here, in terms of marginal utility, is always going to be the thing that affords you the biggest marginal utility points. That's the one thing that you have to keep in mind. Just getting the book that you want is the thing that feels the best, not necessarily getting the book at a discount or getting the book with super hot cosplayers taking your photo. And this is the trap that a lot of key collector Kevins fall into, right? Key collector Kevins, like I already mentioned, they're so concerned with going to the moon. They so desperately want to go to the moon, but yet they're so fearful of losing money. Well, we got to use the red pen here, right? Because we're talking about fear. They're so fearful of the feels bad man, right? They don't want to lose out on their investment. They see the economy. They've been watching Ryan from Automatic Comic Books. They've been watching Brian over at Brian's comic book videos talking about the market. We see all the negative, red metrics. Dave from Comic Book Investments says minus 80%. We're looking at that and we're like, no, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to buy this book because I'm so fearful of the loss aversion here, of the prospect theory. I don't want to have my grail go down in value. That would feel so much worse than having it go up in value. But really, when we're thinking about, making these purchases and thinking about this, we have to, again, rewire our thinking here because we have to understand that the goal right here is to have DARKHAWK number 1. We want to buy this book, right? We want to buy this book. So we have to think to ourselves, we have to get over this idea of the loss aversion theory. And we actually have to think of it in terms of loss of not just, losing potential value, but we actually have to think about it in terms of opportunity cost loss. That's really the kicker, because when we think about utility theory and we think about, the potential feels badness of the book going up or down, which again, we have no idea if the book is going to go up or down. We've been doing our Silver Age indexes, but we have no idea if the market is going to continue to go up in value or if the market is going to continue to go down in value. All we know is that in the history of comic books, from 1970 to 2022, we've basically been doing this, right? That's what we know. We basically have been going up for the most part over the course of the last 50 years, and things have gone up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. And this is all noise, right? This is all noise. The only thing that we have to really worry about is the opportunity cost versus the opportunity loss that we might feel if we don't make the purchase of our DARKHAWK #1. So the real equation, and this is the thing that I want to leave you guys in this video here today, the real equation that we have to think about is opportunity cost versus opportunity loss plus marginal utility. Now, that's a lot of words. Swaggle said a lot of words. Opportunity cost versus opportunity loss plus marginal utility is the only formula we need to be thinking about. We need to get rid of the loss aversion theory here. And we need to think about this. Now, opportunity cost. Again, what is the opportunity cost? If I purchase DARKHAWK #1 today for $100, it could potentially go down in value. Yes, that is 100% the possibility that it could go down in value over the course of the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years, right? And if I were to do that and I were to make that purchase, that would have a severe opportunity cost for me, that it would be going down in value because that $100 that is now effectively $70, I could have been buying some other book like Sleepwalker #1, which would have obviously gone up in value over the course of that 3 years. And then I could have had $130. So I have, $60 of opportunity cost that occurred because I bought this book right now. Now, the other thing that we have to think about though is opportunity loss, how that affects the idea of us buying this book. Because here's the thing, buying DARKHAWK #1 for $100 is not easy to do. You're gonna have a real hard time finding this book for $100. I mean, really, because we all know this book is actually worth $1 million. So when you're following all these great Instagram accounts that are posting their DARKHAWK #1, selling them at $100, and you see the opportunity, I mean, you have to be able to jump on it, because otherwise this might be an opportunity lost. And so you're thinking about your opportunity loss plus your marginal utility here, right? Because again, what is the idea? Kevin wants to own DARKHAWK #1. This is his grail. This is everyone in the comic book market's grail. And we have to think about those 100 points we get from just owning the book, being happy that we have the book. So really, we're evaluating our opportunity lost and our marginal utility against the opportunity cost of this book, presumably going down by, some marginal nominal amount of value, when in reality, again, ups and downs in the market, it's all noise. It's all noise, guys. It's all noise, because over the course of the long term, since this is your ultimate grail and no one is ever going to sell their DARKHAWK #1, we know that, at some point in 2050, what is this value of the book? Well, obviously the value of the book is going to be all the way up here, especially if it's DARKHAWK #1. So in 2050, if you're thinking about holding on to this thing for a long time, there really is no opportunity cost that you have to worry about. You just have to think about the opportunity loss and the marginal utility that you're going to get for yourself over the course of owning the book for this many years. So where am I going with this? What am I talking about here? Again, guys, we are so tied up to the idea of loss aversion theory here and prospect theory. And again, I'm not saying you should be leveraging your credit cards and comic books are the ultimate investment answer. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is this. Remember, we're so wired here. We're so wired as people to fear the loss. Again, this feels bad mechanic with this sad face for Kevin right here is so strong. This is so powerful. The idea that our book is going to go down in value, that we will avoid wanting to feel bad at all costs, and we will avoid buying ourselves the great grail that we really want to have. And this idea of utility, the happiness points that we get from just owning the book, we're so paralyzed by this idea of losing out on our money that we will, sacrifice this feeling of satisfaction. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that because, again, the market is a marathon. And if we're going to be in it for a long time, it doesn't really matter what you end up buying it for, okay? Because over the course of the market, when there's times when it goes down, there will be times when it goes up, and then there will be times when it goes down again, and there will be times when it goes up. But overall, at the end of the day, DARKHAWK, number one, is going to be worth $1 million. And what does it matter right now if you buy it for 100 and it goes to 70? Obviously, in 20 years' time, it's going to be worth this. We're going to all have our private islands, and this is why you cannot focus on the loss aversion theory, because it's going to prevent you from getting the book that you actually really want. Anyways, that's all for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.